The sound of the gunshot rang out, sharp and deafening. In that instant, everything around me froze. My heart stopped as I turned to see my daughter, crumpled on the ground, her hands gripping her leg, blood staining the grass beneath her. Her eyes were wide with fear as she let out a quiet, painful whisper. "Mom, help me!" But it wasn't the pain in her voice that paralyzed me. It was the icy words that followed from Karen, the HOA Karen. That's what happens when you disobey HOA rules. Her voice was devoid of any remorse, as if my daughter's life was nothing more than collateral damage in a twisted game of power. I rushed to my daughter's side, my hands shaking as I pressed them against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. My mind was racing. How had this gone so far? What kind of person shoots someone, especially a disabled child, over something as trivial as parking in the wrong spot? The answer hit me like a punch in the gut. Karen had never seen us as human. To her, we were just obstacles to her perfect little world. As I held my daughter, trying to comfort her in the chaos of that moment, rage began to boil inside me. This wasn't just about the rules anymore. This was an act of violence, a calculated attack, and I was going to make sure Karen paid for it. I looked up, meeting Karen's cold gaze. She stood there, the gun still in her hand, a sick grin spreading across her face. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. This was personal, and I was done running. Karen had been trouble from the moment we moved into this neighborhood. At first, I thought she was just a rigid stickler for the rules. After all, that's what the HOA was supposed to be for, right? To keep the peace and make sure everyone followed the same guidelines. But as time went on, I realized Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was manipulating them. She bent them to fit her own desires, her own sense of superiority, and she used them to control anyone she deemed inferior to her. I had enough to deal with in my life, raising a disabled daughter and making sure she had everything she needed left me with little energy for petty neighborhood drama. But Karen had a way of inserting herself into every part of my life. If it wasn't complaints about the way we maintained our lawn, it was demands about how we parked. No matter what we did, she found something wrong. She didn't just want things to be nice and orderly, she wanted everything to be her way. If we didn't conform, she made sure we knew it. The first few times, I let it go. I tried to avoid confrontation, thinking that maybe she was just one of those people who had to have everything perfect. I let her make those snide comments, let her send the occasional letter to the HOA about some minor infraction. But when her behavior turned more personal, more aggressive, that's when I started to push back. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. This was about power. Karen didn't like being challenged. She didn't like anyone defying her. And she didn't take kindly to anyone who didn't bow down to her authority. The real tension began when Karen started to target the way I parked my car. It wasn't just a matter of convenience or aesthetics to her. It was a matter of control. My daughter, who relies on a wheelchair, needed closer parking to make it easier for her to get in and out of the car. But Karen didn't care about that. She didn't care that my daughter's disability made certain things more difficult. All Karen cared about was enforcing the rules, no matter the cost. To her, our needs didn't matter. She began sending me official warnings. "You're in violation of HOA policy," she'd say in her cold, clipped tone. "This will not be tolerated." Each letter was a reminder that I was on thin ice, that my family was being scrutinized under her watchful eye. Every time I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to break the rules, but needed special parking for my daughter's safety, Karen simply dismissed it. She didn't care to understand. To her, my situation didn't matter. I wasn't following her version of the rules, and that was the only thing that mattered to her. Her warnings became more frequent, more threatening. She started giving me deadlines to fix things, sending letters to the HOA, and even talking to my neighbors about my supposed violations. At first, I thought I could ignore her, but it quickly became clear that Karen was no ordinary HOA member. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was waging a personal war. What had started as small annoyances, complaints about the lawn, or minor infractions, was quickly spiraling into something much more sinister. Karen's fixation on controlling every little detail of my life grew increasingly exhausting. She wasn't just enforcing rules for the sake of order. She was using those rules as a weapon. She wanted to control my family, to make us feel small, insignificant, and powerless. And the more I tried to stand up for myself, the more determined she became to put me in my place. What had started as a petty nuisance was now a battle for my dignity. But I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. Not when it came to my daughter. I was done letting her walk all over me, done letting her think she had the power to dictate our lives. But what I didn't know was that Karen's cruelty wasn't just limited to petty complaints or snide remarks. She was preparing to escalate things in a way that would change our lives forever. The worst was yet to come. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. My daughter and I had just returned from a doctor's appointment, the car ride having been long and exhausting for her. She was tired, and I was too, physically drained from the stress of balancing everything. As I struggled to help her out of the car and make sure she was comfortable, I saw Karen approaching us down the driveway, her footsteps deliberate, her face as cold as ever. She had been watching us from across the street, waiting for a moment to strike. "You're parked in the wrong spot again," Karen said, her voice clipped and stern. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at the car, then shifted to my daughter, who was struggling to move. "You've been warned, and I'm tired of this." I felt the familiar sting of frustration welling up inside me. I knew she was the kind of person who could never let anything slide, but this was too much. I had explained before, my daughter's disability required that we park in this specific spot so she could easily get in and out of the car. But Karen didn't care. To her, the rules were all that mattered. Anything that didn't fit into her perfect, narrow vision of how things should be was an infringement. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Karen, please, my daughter needs a space. We've talked about this before." But instead of hearing reason, I saw Karen's face twist with anger. She wasn't interested in understanding. She was only interested in her own version of justice. Without a word, she reached into her bag, and that's when I saw it, the gleam of metal in her hand. My stomach dropped, and for a split second, time seemed to slow down as I realized what she was holding. A gun. My heart skipped a beat, and a cold rush of terror filled my veins. "Karen, what are you doing?" I demanded, my voice shaky now, unable to disguise my fear. "This is insane. You can't just..." But before I could finish my sentence, Karen cut me off. "You don't understand, do you? I gave you warnings. You disobeyed me, and now you have to learn the hard way." She spat, her words venomous. Everything happened in a flash. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed in the air, louder than I ever thought possible, like the world itself had just shattered. My mind went blank for a moment, and then the scream, my daughter's scream, cut through the air, a sound that will haunt me forever. "Mom!" She cried, her voice laced with pain, as she collapsed to the ground, clutching her leg. I froze for just a moment, unable to comprehend what had just happened. My daughter, my sweet, innocent daughter, had been shot. The blood pooled around her, bright red against the pavement, and I could feel the panic setting in. I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I tried to assess the injury. Blood was pouring from the wound, and I could see the horror in her face as she gasped for air, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle. She was in agony. "Hold on. Baby, just hold on," I whispered desperately, pressing my hands against the wound in an attempt to stop the bleeding. I could feel my heart racing, each beat like a drum in my chest as I fought to stay calm. I needed to get her help. I needed to get her to the hospital. But my mind was racing. How could this be happening? What kind of person shoots someone over a parking spot? Over something so insignificant? I turned to Karen, who stood a few feet away, her gun still in hand. I was shaking with fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "You just shot my daughter. You can't just do this. She's disabled. She didn't deserve this." But Karen didn't respond with any sign of remorse. She stood there, watching with that chilling, detached expression on her face. It was as if my daughter's suffering didn't even matter. It was like she was just observing a scene from a movie, detached from any human emotion. She didn't care. That's what happens when you disobey HOA rules, Karen said, her voice cold, almost too calm for someone who had just committed an unforgivable act. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like the shooting was just another lesson she was teaching. I couldn't believe my ears. How could someone, how could anyone say something so callous, so heartless? This wasn't about parking violations or HOA rules. This was about a person using their power to inflict harm, to control and dominate others with zero regard for human life. I looked down at my daughter, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched her leg. The pain was too much, and it was my worst nightmare come to life. I was a mother, her mother, and I couldn't keep her safe. I turned back to Karen, my fury boiling over. You will pay for this. I swear you will pay. But Karen simply watched me, unfazed. Her lips curved into a twisted smile, as if she had won. The power she had over us in that moment was terrifying. She had taken everything from me, the safety of my daughter, the security of our home, and now even my sense of humanity. I was shaking, trembling with rage and fear, but I had to stay focused. I had to get my daughter the help she needed. Please, I called out, my voice breaking, someone help us? But the neighborhood was eerily quiet. No one came. No one moved. It felt as if the world had gone still, leaving me alone with this madwoman and my wounded daughter. I pressed my hands harder against her leg, trying to keep the blood from flowing faster. But I knew time was running out. As the minutes stretched on, I realized one undeniable truth. Karen wasn't just a cruel neighbor. She was a danger. And now, she had made sure I would never forget just how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. And as I looked down at my daughter, the image of her bloodied and broken, I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to make Karen face the consequences for what she had done. I wasn't going to let her destroy us. Not this time. Not ever again. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. Karen's behavior had been escalating for months, each encounter more uncomfortable than the last. At first, I chalked it up to her being an overbearing neighbor, someone who thought she had the right to dictate how everyone else should live. It started with minor complaints, the way we kept our yard, the positioning of our car, even the color of the front door. Small things, really, but Karen didn't see them as small. To her, everything was a violation of some unwritten rule that she had created in her mind, a rule that only applied to others, never to her. I didn't mind most of it at first. After all, what's the harm in a neighbor wanting things to be tidy? But over time, Karen's criticism started to feel more personal. It wasn't just about making sure the lawn was cut or the car was parked correctly, it was about control. It became clear that Karen didn't just want to maintain the neighborhood's image. She wanted to maintain her image. She wanted everything to bend to her will, and if something or someone didn't fit, she would try to force it into line. It wasn't just me that Karen took issue with, it was my daughter. That's when I knew we were in trouble. It started innocuously enough. Karen made a comment one morning about how people like her, referring to my daughter, were difficult to accommodate in the community. She wasn't talking about the physical disability that made my daughter's life harder. She was talking about her existence, her presence in the neighborhood, as if it were an inconvenience to others. People like her just take up space, Karen had muttered to a neighbor, loud enough for me to overhear. It's a shame they can't just stay in their own areas. I was stunned. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I froze in place. I had never encountered such blatant ableism, such cruelty, especially from someone so outwardly concerned with following the rules. But Karen didn't care about what was fair or right, she cared about control. She cared about how things looked from her perspective, and she wanted the world around her to reflect her version of perfection. At first, I didn't know how to respond. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she had just said something thoughtless. But as time passed, Karen's behavior grew more overt. It wasn't enough to just criticize my daughter's presence. Karen started targeting her directly, making remarks that were so cruel they left me speechless. One day, as I was unloading groceries, Karen walked by. Her eyes narrowed. "Maybe you should just move," she said, barely looking me in the eye. "Somewhere more suited to your kind of people." "My kind of people?" I repeated, incredulity creeping into my voice. "Yes," Karen replied, voice cold and indifferent. "The kind who don't really fit in." She didn't say anything more, but the words hung in the air, heavy with disdain. It was like a slap across my face. I couldn't even process what she was saying. The venom in her words, the sheer hatred behind them. It was like she wanted us to feel like we didn't belong, to feel that we had no right to exist in the very space we'd called home for years. That was the moment I realized that Karen wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She was a bully, a manipulator, someone who thrived on making others feel small, insignificant, and unwelcome. She wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. She was using those rules as a weapon, a way to control the neighborhood and force everyone to bow to her twisted version of what was acceptable. I tried to fight back. I filed complaints with the HOA, but it felt like I was running into a brick wall. Every time I thought we had made some headway, Karen used her influence to shut me down. She would talk to the other board members, play her games, and twist the facts until they believed she was in the right. I would go door to door, asking neighbors to back me up, but Karen's hold on the community was strong. Slowly, the walls started closing in. It seemed like no one wanted to challenge her. Every time I thought I had a chance to stand up for my daughter, Karen would strike back, using her power to isolate us. She spread rumors about our family, questioned our intentions, and tried to pit neighbors against us. At first, I thought the HOA would step in, but Karen's grip was too tight. I felt like I was losing, like I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and no matter what I did, it seemed like Karen always had the upper hand. Then came the day that changed everything. I had no idea it would escalate so quickly that Karen's need for control would push her so far. But one afternoon, it all went wrong. My daughter and I had been out running errands, and when we returned home, I noticed Karen watching us from her porch. She was standing there, like she was waiting for something to happen. I didn't think much of it at first, just another one of her strange, passive-aggressive behaviors. But that day was different. As I helped my daughter out of the car, Karen came striding over, her steps purposeful, her face already set in its usual scowl. And without any warning, she unleashed her fury. The argument we had was nothing new, just a continuation of everything that had come before. But this time, something snapped. Karen, with her face twisted in rage, did something I never thought possible. She pulled out a gun. The shock of it left me frozen in place, but the next moment, everything changed. Karen had decided to take matters into her own hands, and this time, it wasn't just about power or control. This time, it was about violence. She was done with the rules, done with manipulating everyone around her. This was personal, and my daughter and I were about to pay the price for it. The moment the gunshot rang through the air, everything around me seemed to freeze in place. Time felt suspended, like the world had gone still. My heart pounded in my chest, and my mind raced, unable to process what had just happened. The sound of the bullet ricocheting in my brain was deafening. I turned to see my daughter, her body collapsing to the ground, her hands clutching her leg. Her face was twisted in agony, her eyes wide with terror as blood began to seep through her fingers. "Mom, help me," she screamed, her voice shaking with pain. I felt my knees give way, but I caught myself just in time. I dropped to the ground beside her, my hands trembling as I tried to assess the damage. The blood was already pooling around her, staining the grass beneath her. I could see her leg, twisted at an unnatural angle, blood flowing freely from the wound. My mind was racing, but all I could think about was getting her to safety, getting her help. But then I heard Karen's voice, cutting through the chaos, as cold and detached as ever. "That's what happens when you disobey HOA rules," she said, as if this was all some twisted lesson, some petty punishment for a violation. There was no regret, no remorse in her tone. Her words were just as horrifying as the act she had just committed. I turned to face her, fury building in my chest. "You shot my daughter." I screamed, my voice hoarse with disbelief and rage. "How could you? How could anyone do something like this?" Karen didn't even flinch. She stood there, holding the gun loosely in her hand as though it was no big deal. The look in her eyes was chilling, detached, almost amused, as if she were watching some kind of sick game unfold before her. She wasn't even reacting to the horror she had caused. To her, this was just another way to assert her dominance, another way to make sure everyone knew she was in control. "You should have followed the rules," Karen said, her voice flat. "You don't get to break them and expect there to be no consequences. You've been warned. Over and over again." She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving me. "This is just the beginning. You're not in charge here. I am." The rage inside me boiled over. How dare she talk to me like this? How dare she treat my daughter like this? I wanted to scream, to fight back, to make her pay for what she had done. But I couldn't think straight. I couldn't focus on anything except the fact that my daughter was lying there in pain, and every second that passed was another second of agony for her. I pulled her into my arms, trying to apply pressure to the wound, my hands slick with blood. "Hang on, baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Please just hold on. We're going to get you help. I won't let her hurt you anymore." But as I held my daughter, trying to comfort her, I saw Karen's twisted smile, her face full of satisfaction. She had done this. She had taken it too far, and now there was no going back. I realized in that moment that Karen wasn't just a neighbor, she wasn't just a bully. She was a danger, a real threat to my family. And if I didn't act now, if I didn't do something, I might lose my daughter. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, dialing 911. The operator's voice came through the line, calm and professional. But all I could hear was the thudding of my heart, the rush of adrenaline as I tried to keep my daughter conscious, keep her alive. "We need help. My daughter's been shot. Please hurry." I screamed into the phone, my voice frantic. I didn't know how much time we had, but it felt like every second was slipping away. Karen just stood there, watching me, her gaze never leaving mine. She wasn't moving, wasn't running, she was savoring this. She wanted to see me break, to watch me suffer. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. She wasn't just angry at me. She wanted to destroy us. She wanted to see us ruined. And now she had gone too far. I had no choice but to fight back. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. Not after everything she had done to us. I glanced at my daughter, her eyes fluttering, her breaths shallow. I knew I had to get her help. The police were on their way, but I wasn't sure if they would get here in time. I turned to Karen, fury blazing in my chest. "You think you've won?" I spat. "You think you can just get away with this?" Karen didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her smile said it all. She thought she had broken me, thought she had taken everything from me. But she was wrong. I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let her destroy my family. I turned back to my daughter, trying to stay calm for her sake. "Stay with me, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Just hang on, please." But I could see it in her eyes, the fear, the confusion. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't understand how someone who was supposed to be a part of the community could hurt her like this. I glanced up at Karen one last time, a vow forming in my mind. "This isn't over," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone again." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. As I waited for help to arrive, I knew this wasn't just a fight for my daughter's life, it was a fight for justice. And I was going to win. The immediate aftermath of the shooting was like being trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape. I was in a fog, my thoughts spinning in circles. My daughter, my sweet daughter, was in the hospital with a bullet wound, her leg shattered. The doctors assured me she would recover physically, but emotionally, I knew the road ahead would be long. There was a heavy silence in the room as I sat by her side, holding her hand, trying to keep it together for her. but it felt like the world had come crashing down around us. Karen had done the unthinkable. She shot my daughter. And for what? Because we had parked in the wrong spot? Because we dared to disobey her petty HOA rules? The act itself felt surreal. It was hard to reconcile the woman who had been a neighbor, albeit a difficult one, with the monster who had just tried to take my child's life. I kept replaying the moment in my head, hearing the gunshot over and over, the blood, the pain, and the words she had spoken afterward. That's what happens when you disobey HOA rules, still haunted me. As I sat there beside my daughter, the gravity of the situation slowly sank in. The police had come, but it wasn't enough for Karen to simply be arrested. This wasn't just about punishment for a crime, it was about making sure someone like Karen would never have the power to hurt another person again. I couldn't sit idly by. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation and escape the consequences of her actions. Not when she had taken so much from us. The hospital staff worked quickly and efficiently, but I could see the exhaustion in their eyes. They were doing their best to save my daughter, but I knew the trauma she had suffered wasn't just physical. The emotional scars ran deep. My daughter had been through so much already, and now she had to deal with the horrifying reality that someone had tried to kill her over something so small, so insignificant. She didn't understand it. How could she? How could anyone? The psychological toll was going to be far worse than the physical wound she had endured. Every day, I sat by her bed, holding her hand, comforting her as best as I could, but I felt helpless. I made a silent promise to her that I would make sure Karen paid for what she had done emotionally, legally, and in every possible way. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't out for retribution. I just wanted justice. And I knew that if I didn't step up, if I didn't push for this, no one else would. Karen had always manipulated the system before, using her position to get away with her actions, her abuses of power. But I wasn't going to let that happen this time, not when it involved my daughter. The legal process was long, slow, and often disheartening. There were days when I felt like giving up. Karen had connections, and those connections worked overtime to protect her. She had lawyers who used every tactic in the book to delay the trial, to discredit witnesses, to manipulate the facts. But I refused to back down. I spoke with the detectives, shared every detail about Karen's past behavior, her history of harassment, and how she had escalated things over the months leading up to the shooting. I reached out to the neighbors who had been victimized by her, who had witnessed her cruelty. They were scared, yes, but many of them came forward. Slowly but surely, a case against Karen began to take shape. It wasn't easy. She fought back with everything she had, but we kept pushing. As the trial date approached, I was filled with dread. Would Karen get away with it? Would she slip through the cracks of the justice system the way she always had before? The courtroom was tense as the trial began, and Karen's smug expression never left her face. But as the evidence piled up, I saw her confidence start to crack. The bullet that had torn through my daughter's leg, the evidence of her years of harassment, the witnesses who had come forward, all of it painted a picture of a woman who was not just a petty, controlling neighbor, but a dangerous, manipulative individual who had escalated her cruelty to violence. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Karen sat there, stoic, her eyes darting nervously toward the jury. She tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This wasn't a petty violation anymore. This wasn't just an HOA dispute. It was attempted murder. And then came the moment that shifted everything. The jury deliberated for hours, the weight of the decision on their shoulders. And when they returned with a verdict, I held my breath. Guilty, the judge announced. Karen's face went pale, her arrogance slipping away as the reality of her conviction set in. The room was filled with a tense silence as Karen was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders as the judge pronounced the sentence, knowing that justice had been served. But even as I sat there, listening to the verdict, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. It wasn't about celebrating someone else's downfall. It was about knowing that my daughter would be safe now, that Karen wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else again. It was about peace, not just for us, but for everyone who had been victimized by Karen's reign of terror. As the court session ended and Karen was led away in handcuffs, I felt a quiet sense of relief. My daughter was safe. She would heal physically. We could begin to rebuild our lives, to put the nightmare behind us. The road to recovery wouldn't be easy, but it was one we would walk together. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of fear and anxiety begin to lift. It wasn't over. Karen's damage would never fully be undone. But we had fought and we had won. I looked at my daughter holding her hand, and I knew one thing for sure. I would never stop fighting for her. Never again would anyone like Karen have the power to destroy our peace, our safety, or our happiness. The fight wasn't over, but we had taken back control. And that was all that mattered. As I sit here now, looking back on everything we've been through, I can't help but feel both proud and heartbroken. Proud of the way my family stood together, proud of the strength we found within ourselves when we thought we were broken, but also heartbroken because no one should ever have to endure what we did. No parent should ever have to watch their child suffer like that, not at the hands of anyone, let alone someone who was supposed to be a neighbor. But despite the pain, we came out stronger. My daughter is healing not just physically, but emotionally as well. It's been a long road, but we're walking it together, and that's what matters most. We didn't let Karen break us. No matter how hard she tried, no matter what she threw at us, we fought back with everything we had. If you've ever faced someone who tried to tear you down, someone who made you feel small or powerless, you know how hard it can be to rise above that. But I want you to know, no one has the power to destroy your strength unless you let them. Stand up for what's right. Stand up for yourself. And never let anyone tell you that you don't have a voice. This isn't just my story. It's all of our story. A story of survival. A story of resilience. And a story of the fight for justice. If you believe that no one should ever be treated the way we were, hit that subscribe button. Let's make sure these stories are heard and that no one like Karen ever gets away with hurting others again. The fight for justice isn't over, and we're just getting started.